welcome to my fun little tutorial on one of my most favorite things to paint. And that is just these free-flowing, kind of crazy, I guess they're roses, I don't know, we can call them whatever we want. But since it's Valentine's Day, I thought I would show you how to do it in a heart shape. And I love painting these because when I have like my sketchbook open and I just want to paint, I just want to just relax. This is so much fun because you don't have to do any sketching or drawing first. These are very free form, very flowy. Paint gets all mingled and mixed around. So they're just a lot of fun to create, and I love doing it in the heart shape, which is perfect for Valentine's Day. So I've got a few that are in a heart shape. This one's really kind of free, flowy, and messy. I love it. And then this one was a full page, which is also a lot of fun. And the thing about doing this is that you really get to practice and kind of play with your paints. And also it's a really good exercise in using your brush, different brush strokes. So let's get started. So all you'll need for this is a simple sheet of watercolor paper. I am just using the Canson XL watercolor paper. It's 140 pound. I actually kind of like this paper for this process because it tends to dry unevenly, and that just kind of lends itself to these flowers. They really look organic and flowy. And then I've got my Prima Classics and Tropical set. Of course, you can use any colors, any paint, any watercolor paint, but I just like using these because it gives me a lot of color options. And you're going to want a round brush. Experiment with different sizes. The bigger your brush, the bigger your flowers will be. So you can, this is a 12, you can do some really big flowers. I kind of like to do mine a little smaller. This is a size 6. So I've also got my water and a mat for blotting as well. So let's get started. You want to make sure you have some wet paint. So I'm adding water here to my pan, getting a fully loaded brush. You don't want to be timid about loading your brush. You want it full of paint. And you can start anywhere. I kind of start in the middle here. And you just want to do a few little dots to indicate the center of the flower. Then you can start on the innermost petals. So to do a petal, I start with the very tip of my brush, and then I push, and you see how wide it gets there, and then I come back to a tip. And then I'll do a second petal. So I typically will like start on the edge of where that thin part is. Start with my tip, push, and curve back to my tip. Tip, push, and tip. And you can see how each brush stroke, depending on how you hold your hand, you're going to get all kinds of shapes, which really lends itself to flower painting because they are kind of organic and flowy. While the paint is still wet, I like to grab other colors, so I'm just grabbing here a yellow and just kind of blending it in. I like mine to be really flowy and wet and juicy and just all sorts of colors in there. You can also combine, so go back and remove some of those white edges, but I will tell you it's going to look strange when you first make these, that you've got all these white edges showing. But just kind of trust the process. I know when I first started painting, the hardest part for me was to leave white. It's like, I don't know if it's left over from coloring books or what when we're kids, but we just want to cover everything. But you can see how the end result of having those white spaces is really dynamic, and it really gives form to your flowers. So it's a good way to remember to leave white space in your paintings. So once you get the first round going here, you just start on the second round. So typically I like to start with my tip on the widest part of one of these petals. So I'll start kind of in the middle, tip, push, and back to my tip, tip, push, and back to my tip. And like I said, really experiment with holding your brush different ways. You could even, that one I did like a little curve. So just really experiment with using your brush. It's a great exercise to loosen up and really get to know your brush. I'm going to add a little purple here just because I can't stop with the color. And you can keep going. I could do a whole nother round here, but I kind of like the smaller ones. So I'm going to stop there and start on my next flower. So I'm going to do my center, put it about right there, a few little dots, tip, push, tip. When you get to a space where the flowers are going to combine, I typically let them. So I'll start tip, push it right into that other petal, and just let those colors mingle and mix. It gives a watery, really cool flow when you're finished. And then of course as you go, so as I come over here to do another flower, this one will typically have dried, and so I might handle it a little differently. I'll show you on that side. But let some of your flowers mingle with each other for sure. So once I get a couple flowers in, then I start to add greenery. So I'm just grabbing a little green here, and I do these kind of the same way. I'll start typically where two flowers are merging with each other. I push, and I'm going right on top of that wet paint, and then pull out to a tip, push, and pull out to a tip. And I like to leave a little white space in each leaf. And for whatever reason, I typically will do 2 leaves beside each other. So once you get a few flowers in, you're going to start to kind of see how your heart is going to come together. And you're going to have areas where you obviously are not going to be able to fit a flower in there without going past the border of your heart too much. So this is where I start to add in a background color. And I'm just going to use this blue, beautiful blue from the Classics palette. And some areas I'll leave a white line. You can see this paint is still wet. So if I were to butt right up to that petal, those two paints are going to collide with each other. So I leave a little white space in some areas, but then in others I go right up to the flower and just kind of let those paint colors mix and mingle together. And what ends up happening is that you will have some areas where your background has a white space, but there's some areas where the paints have collided, and it just gives a really beautiful effect. And so I do the background just a little at the time, so I'll just go here and there and start adding some of that background color. Let some of the paint colors collide. Like here, this pink is still wet, so that blue is going to kind of go into that flower. So as I start adding more flowers, the background will start to take shape. You want to remember too to make sure that your brush is wet enough. So I'm going to show you actually on a separate piece of paper. If you don't have your brush wet enough and you're kind of timid about putting paint on your brush, what can happen is that you don't get a lot happening, or you'll get all of these uneven strokes like this, and that is because you don't have enough paint and water on your brush. If you use a fully loaded brush, you should be able to get a full petal. You can experiment with the amount of water to paint ratio. So I still got a full line there, but you see how much lighter it is. So it really helps you to understand your paint to water ratio too. So once you come to an area like here where I've got these leaves kind of coming out, I've started the center kind of close. You really just kind of fudge it. So I'll do my first round here of petals. And then when I come to this back area, I'm just going to put the indication. So I don't paint over that leaf. I just put the indication that there's something happening back there. Just kind of fudge it. And you do want some areas where your flowers come out further than your heart. And it's okay to bring leaves out as well. Once you get your flowers into your heart the way you like them, then you can let it dry, and I'll show you some things that I like to do later on when everything is dried. So I've given some time for everything to dry now, and now you just get to really have fun with some extra media. My favorite thing to do is actually to outline just the leaves, as you can see in this one. For whatever reason, I think it just gives it kind of shape and some form. Because sometimes the leaves, as you can see on this one, they get a little too flowy. So I just like to take a black pen. This is a Uniball Signo, but I also love Sharpie pens. Really your favorite that you like to use will work. And I just kind of outline them and put in that middle line too, where I've got that white left over. I just kind of draw a line there as well. So I outline my leaves. And then beyond that, you can also, if some of your flowers are kind of light, or like this one for instance, the middle part here is just kind of doesn't have a lot of color to it, you can always come back with a little more intense, you still want it watery, but a little more intense color, and just add some enhancements to some of your petals. Another way I like to do it is with watercolor pencils, or just colored pencils as well. So you can really add some more color right on top of your petals that way. And that's a really good way to add more color and more definition, more shape. And then you can really go to town, like this one. The painting itself was a little different, as I left a lot more white spaces in my flowers and not a lot of flow. In fact, actually this background, I didn't add paint to this background at all. So I painted the flowers, and then I came back with an oil pastel to add in this background, and used Sharpie pens and a white paint pen to add all of these details. So you can go to Doodle Town on any of these and really come out with some pretty dynamic paintings. So I hope you've enjoyed this process. Like I said, it's one of my most favorite things to do. So have fun with it, and I really hope that you have a wonderful Valentine's Day. However you celebrate, I hope it's full of happiness and love. Thank you. See you next time.